All right. Good afternoon, Realtors. This is Nick Romitis, CEO of South Carolina Realtors, and we're launching our monthly webinar series this month. We have a very special guest with us today, and if you'll indulge me for a second, I'd love to share some insights for you here. Anton Gunn was originally born in Portsmouth, Virginia, but came to South Carolina for his education. He's a graduate of the University of South Carolina, where he played football for the Gamecocks. Go Gamecocks! He also earned his master's degree from USC as well. And Anton comes from a family of service and sacrifice. You may know Anton. His younger brother, Sharon, was killed on October 12th in the year 2000 in an Al-Qaeda terrorist attack on the USS Cole. Anton, I know that was such a tragedy in his life, but he used it to spark, I think, his a love for service and really launched him into looking at how he can help others with his talents in his life. And that's where I first met Anton when he was elected to the South Carolina House of Representatives, where he served from 2009 to 2011 as a member of the House. Anton was a realtor champion, and I don't think he could go home if he wasn't. His wife, his mother, his mother-in-law. I know many of you know Nancy Johnson in Columbia, but he comes from a long line of realtors in his family and understands our industry and the importance that the leadership role that we have in our communities. He later was appointed by President Obama as a regional director for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. He served in a number of leadership capacities, quickly progressing through that department and his service to our country. And more recently, he was named a resident fellow at Harvard University, where he helps mentor students. He interacts and leads weekly groups with some of the brightest minds in the country. And here closer to home, he was named as the executive director of Community Health Innovation and the Chief Diversity Officer for the Medical University of South Carolina. He currently resides in Charleston, South Carolina with his wife, Tiffany, and his daughter, Ashley. He's an accomplished public servant, an author, speaker, teacher, mentor, dad, husband, and did I mention Gamecock? Anton is I'm pleased to have a friend here with us today. And Anton is we originally reached out to Anton a few months ago to talk about leadership during crisis. And at the time, the crisis that Anton and I were talking about was this COVID-19 and how it's turned our world upside down. And in the middle of that upside down with COVID-19, we had another upside down event in the murder of George Floyd, and now we're finally making race and racial issues first and foremost in a lot of our discussions. And how do we address that as an industry? How do we address that as realtor leaders? So I'm pleased to have Anton today to help us address these issues, to start this conversation. And I just can't say enough good things about Anton. So Anton, I'm going to turn it over to you. Welcome, and thank you for being with us today.
Well, thank you very much, Nick. I really appreciate that warm and wonderful introduction, particularly about my family being in real estate, and of course, my family in public service to our nation. But also, I appreciate you mentioning the Gamecocks, because I want everybody to know that I'm a Gamecock through and through, always have been and always will be. And I got great pride around Gamecocks. But the unfortunate thing, I do have a little bit of orange blood connected to me and my family. because my nephew is a sophomore on the football team at Clemson right now, a
Oh,
recruit
wow.
out of Virginia named Sheridan Jones. And I try to get him to do everything in my power to get him to come be a Gamecock. But Brent Venables wouldn't take no for an answer and did his part. And so he's got a great cornerback up there. So I only root for the defense, and I really only root for the cornerbacks on Clemson, but I would never root for them to win a game. I just can't do it. Sorry. But it's just a pleasure to be here with all of you. What I have outlined for you, it's about 35 to 40 minutes of a presentation where I want to share some backdrop of where we are today, some concepts that I feel like that each of you as realtors can embody and find great value in as you continue to provide the service to your clients, to the communities in which you live, and play the leadership role that you have. I will say to you that I grew up most of my life not knowing anything about real estate. I grew up in a military family, and my father was in the Navy, and so the Navy generally told us where we lived. And we moved to places because the Navy said move there, and then even when we were in places where we could pick our own housing and go where we want to go, it was literally a much simpler process that I don't ever remember meeting a real estate agent in my life. I remember growing up in the most popular real estate firm in my town was Century 21. That's all we ever saw in the late 70s, early 80s. But then over time, there were a few others that started to pop up. And now we know that there's a lot of great companies, a lot of great brands to be attached to so you can provide the services. But no matter what the brands are, what has been a constant is the role that realtors play for their clients and their communities. You're seen as an advisor and an expert in every way, shape, or form around what you do. And whether that's selling a house, whether that's buying a house, whether that's listing a property, or is it about what's going on in our communities? There are people who look to realtors for information and insights to help them to make decisions that somehow come back to their piece of the American dream. And I know this intimately because for the better part of 25 years now, I've been connected to, in my belief, one of the most successful real estate agents in the history of South Carolina, and that is my mother-in-law, Nancy Johnson. Her 33-year career in real estate in Columbia has been incredibly remarkable and unprecedented and innovative in so many ways. Nancy will take any lemons and make them into lemonade or a lemon meringue pie or a lemon pound cake. It doesn't matter what it is. She's going to make something good out of it. And I've watched her be masterful in this industry, even through major disruptions and major downturns. And her new book is called The Top Producer, or $1 Million Producer is the title of the book. Her journey from the cotton field to the capital city is one that I think everybody can get some value out of. And I know I've gotten a lot of value just listening to her lessons around innovation. Now, the reason why innovation is important and the reason why I bring Nancy up is because there's been a lot of ups and downs for all of you in real estate, and you got to overcome them. And I want to say right now, the time that we're in may be some of the most unprecedented time for difficulty for our whole country, particularly our state of South Carolina. Right now, the governor had a press conference today about schools reopening. And so you got parents who are worried about that. You got people who want to list their houses and sell. All of these things are kind of tied in together. So it's really important for us to have some perspective about how we manage through these times. So I'm going to share my screen now. I'm going to put some slides up and we're going to begin a conversation. And if you have a question or comment, use the Q&A function on the chat. This is Zoom. So everything should be live in front of you and you should be able to use the Q&A if you have question and answer. And what I'll try to do is answer questions that you have at the end and give you an opportunity to dialogue around what's important. But of course, I know some people are going to use the comment function, and that's okay as well. But we want Q&A to be going through here so we can help get to your questions and make sure we help you during these tough times. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to put up my slides for each of you to see. Okay. Again, as I start, I'm just happy to be here as the son of a realtor. My mom's in real estate, son-in-law of a realtor, and of course the husband to one as well. And I'm going to jump right into two particular words that I want everybody to focus in on, and that is chaos and crisis. We are in the middle of a monumental amount of chaos and crisis. So whether you look at it from the perspective of just a health crisis and health chaos around COVID-19 and the number of cases in our state, the number of hospitals that are now filling up and having challenges, or the crisis and the chaos around whether you wear a mask or whether you don't wear a mask, and should you be told what to do, or should you have the ability to do what you want to do? There's so much chaos in conversation right now that it's hard for people to make heads or tails of it. And if you move beyond COVID, you can look at our economy, that there's a lot of chaos in our economy. The jobs numbers have been dismal in both ways. One, the number of people who are filing unemployment, the number of people who've lost jobs, employers who are closing their doors, major corporations who are filing bankruptcy and reorganizing their business, which of course has a downstream effect on people in communities. Banks are now making different decisions, which is, they're trying to pull back on the amount of lending that they're doing, or they're not giving lines of credit like they did to some investors who buy real estate. They're not being as aggressive as they were at the height of the market and when things are going well. So you have that kind of a crisis, but then you also have the flip side of that, which is real estate sales right now are only 2 or 3% off of where they were last year at this time. So business is still booming. I'm talking to you here from Charleston, which is our biggest challenge in Charleston is housing inventory and demand. And you list a property today, you could have 6 offers tomorrow. So there's this dichotomy of how do I experience this, how do I deal with it? But I also want to say there's a larger overarching context of chaos and crisis, and I've kind of underlaid them in this framework here. You got the COVID-19 healthcare crisis. You got massive unemployment, job loss, but you also have police violence against Black people in America. I usually don't say this in public forums, but people who are my friends and my family who know me very well know that I've done a lot of things, amazing things in my life, working for the President of the United States, serving in the state legislature, also lecturing at Harvard, enjoying incredible amounts of success. I live a privileged and amazing life as a leader and as a person who tries to do positive things and have impact. But I also am a person that can tell you that there were about 7 times in my life where I thought I was going to be George Floyd. That I remember when I was a sophomore football player at the University of South Carolina, and I went home on Thanksgiving break to Norfolk, Virginia. And I was with my uncle, who happened to be 7 years older than me. So he was 26. I was 19. We went to his job at Wendy's, where he was a manager, to pick up his paycheck. And we were heading back to Virginia Beach to my mom's house. And we stopped at a 7-Eleven gas station to buy some lottery tickets and a bottle of Boone's Farm. Now, I know I'm probably aging myself when I say a bottle of Boone's Farm, because it was a cheap wine that you could buy in the grocery store, and my uncle wanted a bottle of Boone's Farm. He bought the Boone's Farm, and before we could get out of the parking lot at the grocery store, we were surrounded by 3 police cars, 2 of them marked, 1 unmarked. The officers jumped out and they drew their guns on us and told us if we moved, they would shoot. The next 90 minutes proceeded with us being dragged out of the car, put face down on the hood, our car being searched, my uncle's car being searched, throwing all of his dry cleaning out, throwing his book bag out because he was a college student working on his degree in hotel restaurant management. They just kind of tossed the car looking for a gun. And they said to us that they got a report of a drive-by shooting in the community and we fit the description. They never told us anything about why we fit the description, were we driving the same kind of car. They never gave us any of those details. But literally, I felt afraid for my life in the middle of that circumstance. And that has happened 6 other times in my life. Even most recently, a few years back when I moved to Charleston, I got pulled over for some nondescript reason. And I thought it was going to be a problem until the officer learned where I worked. So I share all of this with you to say that my encounters with the police have never really been positive. Some of them have been neutral, but some of them have been negative. But I wouldn't say I left a law enforcement encounter and saying, man, that was an amazing officer. That was a great guy. I had a great encounter like I would have with a great real estate agent or with a great mortgage broker. I haven't had that experience. So police violence is real. We also know that racism and racial bias in America is real. And we're starting to see that manifest itself in multiple ways. The conversation today hasn't been at the place it's been for more than 50 plus years. I mean, we're literally years beyond 1968, where we saw this unprecedented level of social unrest in the late 60s. We haven't seen it until this day. As a matter of fact, there are people all across the world who are protesting against police violence, racial injustice, racism, whether it be systemic, structural, or individual racism. So it's real and palpable. That also has led to some social unrest, that people are very upset about where things are and where things have been, and are responding in ways that are out of the norm or out of what people customarily would expect. So whether it's protest marches every day, or doctors in their white coats taking a kneel for Black lives, or even people marching in the street and unfortunately damaging property. These are all of the responses to the current environment that puts us in a sense of chaos and crisis. We all need to acknowledge that and understand that. Now, the reason why I want to talk about in that context is because the reason why people have this response to chaos and crisis is a feeling of unfairness of it all. That nobody wants to be treated unfair or to feel unfair. And I know some of you watching this video, you might be experiencing some unfairness. So whether it's the fact that your business is not booming the way the rest of real estate is, or you can't show houses the way that you normally showed houses, that you don't have the ability to do open houses like you used to. You don't have the ability to meet with clients the same way that you used to. And you're now having to go through these hurdles that make it difficult for you to build rapport and build a relationship with your clients the way that you're accustomed to being able to build that relationship. It can feel unfair. It can also feel unfair to people who feel like this is all overblown, this is all unnecessary, that this is all, just a little bit too far, and I don't feel like that we're having an objective view of it. Doesn't matter your perspective, you know what it feels like to be treated unfair. I know what it feels like to be treated unfair in a law enforcement encounter. To bring it more home into real estate, I've talked to several agents and I've done some research, and I've had agents say to me, particularly African-American agents, that they feel it's unfair how sometimes they get treated by potential clients or customers, that they schedule an appointment to go list a house and they show up for the listing appointment, and that client decides to not go with them to list their home. And then in the back of their mind, they say, well, maybe they just didn't think I was the right fit. I didn't have the right experience, or maybe I haven't been in the business long enough, or what did I say wrong, or what did I say mistakenly that gave them the wrong vibe that they decided to go list with someone else. And that happens over and over and over again. And then they start to wonder, did they not list with me because I was Black? Did they not list with me because of, my gender? Did they not list with me because of some reason that has something to do with who I am? And I feel like that's unfair. And some of these agents have had to go to lengths like not putting their picture on their business card, not putting their face on a flyer or on their own website. Or maybe you didn't figure out who they were racially until they showed up to an appointment. And sometimes people feel it's incredibly unfair to have to go through this. Or when you do get the listing and it's an exclusive neighborhood and you start to, drive around the neighborhood to see how things are as you prepare to list the house and figure out where to put your signs, a neighbor decides to call the police on you because I've never seen you in this neighborhood before. And now you're getting pulled over by a law enforcement officer to have to explain that I'm a realtor, getting ready to list the house, and I'm just, putting my signs out. Or you're in a neighborhood doing an open house and the neighbors didn't know that you were a person of color doing the open house. And so now there's some concern and some suspicion around what you're doing. All of these things can feel unfair to all of us, and some of us want to see change. But all of this is a manifestation of the crisis that we're in. So let me talk to you a little bit around how this unfairness can manifest itself from a systemic or an individual level and what it may mean for our business. So the unfair impact of chaos and crisis on business could mean lost productivity. You know, you might be distracted in monumental ways that you're not as productive as you used to be, because you're now overthinking, you know, should I wear a mask? Should I go here? Should I do this? How am I going to make sure that I give my clients that sense that I'm being responsible? And so you're less productive because you can't be as efficient as you used to be in the midst of all this chaos and crisis. You also are losing revenue, that, you know, you got less listings and people are concerned about the economy. So they're making a decision, you know what, I'm not going to make any moves. So I'm not going to buy that house that I talked about. I'm not going to buy that second home because I'm just concerned about what may happen. So your clients say, hey, I'm still with you, but not right now. I want to wait till the end of the year to see how things shake out. And this could be impactful on your bottom line of your business, of your whole revenue stream. So it could be very disconcerting to you. Another challenge is just strained resources in general, that more of our agencies and organizations are being tapped to do more with less. The fact that we now are all using broadband in ways that we've never used before. The fact that we're doing meetings virtually from our home, and is our Wi-Fi connected enough? Is our phone plan working right for us? There's so much strain on our resources that it also has a disproportionate impact. So we got to be prepared for it. The last one is closures around business. There's some businesses who literally are closing now, and they're going away, and it can feel very unfair and very dangerous to know that these businesses are going away, never to be seen again. There are some long-term companies. Like if you're from Columbia, anybody lived in Columbia, yesterday's was a great restaurant that we all loved downtown in 5 Points that is closing its doors for good, never to reopen again. So that can feel very unfair for us to lose businesses where we've had a fine place or maybe have worked with in partnership with our real estate business. So the unfair impact on individuals can look like this. You can just be angry about the whole thing. Your clients can be angry about what's going on. Any vendors or partners that you work with can be angry about all of this, and it can manifest itself in how we treat each other. You can also just feel an unprecedented amount of stress. Stress is disconcerting. It also is unhealthy. It could be impacting your body. A lot of us have been talking about the COVID-19 and not the COVID-19 virus, but the 19 pounds that we've all gained since being forced to work remotely and virtually for the last 5.5 months, almost 6 months in some degree. So that can be very disconcerting. Generally, isolation is a bad thing. You may not be used to working from home. You may live alone, and I know lots of friends and folks who are now feeling very isolated because they're at home alone by themselves. It can really be bad for us. And it just gives you a sense of overall frustration. Nobody wants to be frustrated. So here's some long-term consequences of all of this chaos and crisis. It can fundamentally change our business. You know, we may never go back to what normal was before middle of March of 2020. We may never go back. We also may have to change our social norms. Restaurants may only have outdoor seating and require everybody to wear a mask. How you shop may be different. How you engage with people may be different. Will we ever shake hands ever again? Will we ever have the opportunity to give people a hug and spend time with our loved ones like we want to? This could really change our social norms. Our policies and practices, how we police communities, how we design organizations, how we design workplace policies, what new laws get created and passed for realtors on how you do your business. There could be a lot of long-term policies and practices that could change who we are as individuals and change our economy at the same time. Will some of these industries ever come back? They may not. And what this means is a total new way of life for all of us. So this can be really unfair if you don't have a plan and a framework to lead like some of the greatest leaders do. So I want you to pull out a notepad. I want you to pull out a pen if you're ready, because I'm going to go fast and furious on what I call how do we overcome the uncertainty as leaders? How do we move through this uncertain time and lead in a way that we're unmovable, that we're strong, that we are the pillar at which all of our communities build a foundation to overcome this adversity? And I really want to make sure that you prepare for what it means to be a great leader during these difficult times. How do you prepare and lead in this uncertainty? And that is the title of this presentation. And it comes from my context around Winston Churchill, who says, never waste a good crisis. If you don't know Winston Churchill, he says, we're always going to be in a crisis, but we should use a crisis as an opportunity to elevate, to change, and to manage. And that's what Like Steel in the Hour of Chaos is all about. Now, the terms Like Steel in the Hour of Chaos is an ode to one of my favorite hip hop groups of all time, Public Enemy. They had a song called Black Steel in the Hour of Chaos. If you're a hip hop fan, you get this. But if you're not a hip hop fan, maybe you don't. But the content will be relevant. But I want you to know the operative word of my presentation is steel, S-T-E-E-L. And this is what crisis leadership looks like in the era of pandemics, racism, social unrest, and economic uncertainty. So let's jump right into it. I want you to know that it's your job as a leader to lean in during the tough times. It's nothing short of your responsibility is to not shrug away from these difficult times. And as a business owner, as a person who leads people and people look to for advice, you got to find a way to lean in during these tough times. That's what your responsibility is. And so I want you to know, above all else, what people expect you to do is to lean in during these tough times. So what does that look like? It first looks like what I call staying informed. So that's the S in steel. That because people look to you for your expertise, you got to stay informed. You got to have what they talk about in the military is situational awareness about everything that's going on. I've left Northern Virginia about 6 years ago, and there's a real estate agent in Northern Virginia who I'm still on her mailing list. And she sends out a communication every week to every one of her past clients and customers and anyone that she's ever worked with, that she's rented a house to or sold a house to or has bought a house through her. And her newsletter is a full debriefing of everything that's going on that could impact real estate. And so it includes things about mental health and wellness. It includes everything about government regulation. It includes everything around what you should be doing if you want to prepare yourself to thrive in this crisis. So here's my checklist for you as realtors on how you stay informed or have what I call situational awareness. The first thing is your mindset matters more than your skill set. And when I say mindset, I want you to understand that you have to have the right mindset about everything that's going on. You got to believe that you're going to overcome whatever this crisis is, that your team is going to overcome, your agency is going to overcome, every person that you work with is going to overcome. You have to have a mindset that you're going to win in this crisis. You really got to believe that you're going to win. So your mindset has to be right. You got to be resilient, and you got to be focused on what it takes for me to overcome. And I'm going to talk more about that, because if you got the right mindset, you can overcome any adversity. The second part of mindset is that you have to take an approach, and the greatest leaders take this approach. You got to listen more, learn more, understand what is happening around you, and not be afraid to ask questions. Particularly when it comes to this whole conversation around race, that the operative time for all of us to listen, learn, and understand is right now. The operative time to ask questions is right now. Is to become completely curious and inquisitive about things that you don't understand. And I know there's a lot of people who don't understand structural racism or even know what that means, don't even know what the term white privilege means, and says to myself or themselves, listen, I don't have any privilege. I worked hard for everything that I have. And yes, you have worked hard, but white privilege is a construct that people need to understand. And as we come to the end, I'm going to give you some things that you can look at that will help you to understand a little bit more. So, but the time is to listen, learn, and ask questions. Also, I want you to understand that it's important to respond to the crisis, not react to it. See, reactions are what you immediately do when things get difficult. You shouldn't immediately react to anything. You should be deliberate in your response. So don't rush into anything as it relates to changing your business or carrying on with business. You really got to be thoughtful and intentional to respond. The greatest leaders don't respond immediately or react immediately. They respond. So just think about it like in war. Whenever there's an attack on a nation, they don't fire missiles back the next day. What they do is they think about what is our strategic response to this attack. So when we're all being attacked by COVID-19, when our communities are dealing with the issue of race and racism, being attacked by the manifestation of it, how do we respond to the crisis rather than react to it? And the last one is what I call success in the execution. You can have the greatest situational analysis, but your success will come in how you execute on your response to the crisis. That's up to each and every one of you. And that's the S in STEEL, is situational analysis. The next point would be transparency with your team. The T in STEEL is how do you gain more transparency with your teams? And think about your teams as not just the people that you work with, but your team are the people who have bought and sold real estate with you the entire time you've been in business. It's anybody that you're connected to that has helped you to be successful in business. So here's what transparency in your team looks like, because it breeds confidence in you and confidence in your approach to business. So you got to instill this kind of confidence. And so the first step of that is to minimize the fear of the unknown. You can't minimize the fear of the unknown unless you educate yourself, as I said, about listening and learning. People are going to look to you for answers. And so are you going to give them an answer about how is the real estate market? Is it really still as stable as it appears to be? What's your research based on? So people want to know what they don't know. And it's your responsibility as a leader to minimize their fear of the unknown and get them invested into leaning into the change process. And you do that by making sure you communicate the facts about what things are and make sure you provide information through your newsletters and ways that you communicate. Another thing is you got to turn naysayers into believers. And this is my firm belief of what the greatest leaders do. No matter what approach you take to business, or what approach you take to wearing masks, or what approach you take to solving this challenge around race and racism in America, there's always going to be a naysayer, someone who says that's not going to work, or that's irresponsible, or that's not the way to go. There are always going to be those type of folks. But what you have to do is to turn those naysayers into believers. And you turn those naysayers into believers by showing them the pathway of how you're going to get from A to B. You gotta show them the plan. So even in the middle of a pandemic, even in the middle of a tough crisis, even in the middle of all of these things that are going on, what's the game plan that you're going to show your clients about how you sell their house? If you're a broker listening to this video, what's your game plan for increasing diversity of the brokers, of the agents that work in your office? What's your game plan? How are you going to show people that you're different? How are you going to show people that you're committed to inclusion and the values around justice and equity? You got to show the game plan, because there's so many people who are making statements today around, you know, whether it's COVID-19 or whether our response to race and justice, and people are going to see your statement and say, you know what? Yeah, right, whatever. I don't believe it. And the only way they're going to believe it is if you give them a game plan and show them the pathway from how you get to A to Z. And that's really important. The third premise in transparency is to help people to understand that some change is good. That as much as we want to think the chaos and crisis around COVID is bad, but there are some changes good. And I'm actually a manifestation of that. So since I've not been able to travel as much because of COVID, and I haven't been able to go to speaking engagements or, you know, drive around the state the way that I could, and I've been at home more, I've been able to work out more. So where I couldn't go work out other times, I now can go work out during the day consistently. And I've literally lost 25 pounds since being home from COVID. I know some of you have probably gained 19 pounds, but I've lost 25 because I believe that in everything, doesn't matter how bad it is, there is some change that is good. And if you want people to see how this change is good, you got to understand how it's good for you. Maybe it's allowing you to take all of your marketing digital where you were afraid to go digital before. Maybe it's allowing you to grow an online presence where you never were able to grow an online presence before. Maybe it's allow you to show houses in a different way that you haven't been able to do, or allow you to spend more time servicing your past clients about new opportunities because now you've had to slow down. Change can be good, and you got to help people to understand why change is good. The last thing I would say is you got to cultivate what I call this futuristic mindset. You got to get people to see that the future is for them, and there's an opportunity for all of us in the future, and to get people to think about what's going to be great 10 years from now, not 2 months from now, but what is this going to mean for me and my business as a positive way 10 years from now? And how is this whole change process going to be good for people? And if you can cultivate people to have a futurist mindset, you can get people settled down in the middle of this crisis. That's what the best leaders do, and they do that through transparency. Now, the next one is what I call E. This is going to be rapid fire because I want you to understand as a leader how you build confidence and navigate chaos is you got to elevate your effort. That's right. You got to elevate your effort, and you got to elevate your effort to make things better for the people that you lead. You got to make things better for people that you lead. So here's what that looks like. Number one, you got to strengthen your knowledge. I will tell everyone, whatever you think you know about COVID-19, you don't know enough. Whatever you think you know about what this might mean to your business, you don't know enough. Whatever you think you may know about racism, about racial injustice, or structural challenges around race in America, you don't know enough. I'm confident you don't know enough. So in order for you to increase your effort to find success, you got to strengthen your knowledge. You also got to learn how to stand up and speak up. And I believe that the vast majority of us are good people with good hearts and good minds, and we always want to do the right thing. I don't have that belief system that everybody is bad and everybody's a racist and they're evil and they want to do bad things to people who look like me. I don't believe that at all. I actually believe that there's a small minority of people that are like that, maybe only 10%. But the rest of us are generally good people. But the problem is some good people sit silently when those bad actors do bad things. And silence to some people means complicitness. So if you don't want to be seen complicit as a part of the problem, you got to make yourself a part of the solution. And sometimes that is standing up and speaking about things that you know are unfair and unjust, that are wrong. So whether it's tied into wearing a mask or how you social distance or how you're doing business or what might be happening in your community when it comes to the issue of race, it's important for you to have a voice and to be the voice. That's how you increase your effort. You also got to increase your skill set, because just because you stand up and just because you speak up doesn't mean you're going to say the right things. And you know this as a realtor, it's important that you got to find the words that work, not the words that hurt. And if you say the wrong thing to a client, you may not get that listing. If you say the wrong thing about a property, you could get in trouble with the state or the Equal Opportunity Employment Commission or the housing agency, because you used the wrong word to describe a neighborhood or the schools attached to that neighborhood. So the same way you go to continuing education to strengthen your skill set as a realtor, to understand the new contracts that are coming out and what's different about how you market and when you got to file disclosures and all these other things, you can increase your skill set around being a health and wellness leader and also understanding the issue of race and how it impacts us. That's what the best leaders do, and that's how they elevate their effort. The last one is a simple phrase. It's what I call serving people before you try to lead them. The greatest amongst you will always be your servant, and the best thing you can do is learn how to serve people first and lead them second. That's how you elevate your effort as a leader. The next E is the word empower, and that is empowering those around you. Empowering those around you looks like this. If you know the way, then you need to show the way. Now, what do I mean by show the way? Each and every one of you listening to this voice probably has some level of experience in real estate. Some of you may be young and inexperienced and just getting in the game. Others of you have been in for a very long time. But for those of you who've been in the business a long time, now is a great time to develop a mentee in the business. Is there a younger agent, an agent of color, that you can mentor and show them how to grow their business? It's about having an abundance mindset rather than a scarcity mindset. Show people the way to be successful. Show people the way to overcome adversity. Show people the way to get better in business. And if you're a new agent, this is your opportunity to empower the communities that you want to serve as a realtor with information and tools that will help them to make better buying decisions or better selling decisions or better decisions about understanding the real estate game. Everybody has the ability to show people a new way if you know the way. That's how you empower people. You also got to engage new people who are different than you. And when I say engage and elevate others, that means finding people who look differently than you, who are different than you, and engage in a conversation and elevate them in places. If you can't take on a client, if you can't take on a prospect, if you can't do it, and you want to make a referral, make that referral to someone who is of a diverse nature to give them an opportunity to overcome the adversity and elevate them in their success. We all can't service every client that we know. I know that for a fact because I've seen, my wife, my mother-in-law all struggle with that, and they make referrals all the time. But you can be intentional about who you make referrals to and how do you help other people to grow and find success. The last one is a real simple one that I believe the people who win the longest in business and in any industry are the people who focus on people and not on profits. My mother-in-law has a massive referral network because she focuses on maintaining relationships with people. So what are you doing to maintain relationships with new people? What are you doing to maintain relationships and create relationships with people you don't know and find comfort and support that you can offer to other people? That's how you empower people around you. That's the last E in STEAL. Now, as I close to get to some Q&A in the next 3 minutes, I want you to know that it is your responsibility, and the L in STEAL is leading through this crisis. I started about telling you to lean in. Now I want to close by telling you, you have to lead. That you are the people that we have been waiting for. You have a commanding amount of respect in your community. Many of you, your name is in places that most people would never have their name in. You're more popular than your local elected officials. You got a billboard, you got yard signs, you got calendars that are on every calendar and refrigerator in people's houses. You're in people's inboxes every week. You do Facebook Lives and you do networking events. So you're already a household name in a lot of places, or a household name to certain groups of people. Maybe you farm social clubs or associations or churches and other groups. So you are a leader in general. And because you're a leader, it is your responsibility now to step up and lead. That we need you to help to bridge the gap that is hurting our communities between Black and white right now. We need you to step up and bridge the gap into the communications that people are having around how do we keep people safe and keep people healthy. Particularly if you're a real estate agent that's up in age, you know the risk factors for COVID-19, or you don't know, you should know. So it's time to have a conversation that it really is personal about how you get to this place. And that's what great leaders do, is that they lead through the crisis from a place of personal ownership. And I want you to take that ownership. But here's what it looks like. Leading through the crisis means acknowledging the reality of what's going on. Is don't try to pretend like it's not real, or this is not happening, or that change is not upon us, or that the crisis is not here. You can't be happy-go-lucky like it's nothing is wrong, but everything is normal. Acknowledge for people the realities. Acknowledge the realities around race. Acknowledge the realities around the death and dying, the infection that happening for COVID, and that we don't have a cure for this disease or even a way to stop the spread other than social distancing and wearing a mask and, washing your hands. But those things are not 100%. So the best leaders are the ones who are able to talk about this intelligently. So you need to acknowledge the realities. You also need to leverage what I call mindfulness. And mindfulness is this, and I want you to all understand this. You have to take care of yourself, and you got to take care of your mind more than anything else. So be careful about what you put in your mind. How many Facebook posts you read from people who got an opinion but don't have a whole lot of facts, or people who have experience, quote unquote, but don't have expertise, or people who say they have expertise, but you've never seen it manifested through their experience. So you got to be guarded with your mind and make sure that you continue to add to yourself. That if you're a spiritual person, make sure you get spiritual counseling. If you're not a religious person or a spiritual person, but find some way to give positive energy to yourself and your mind, because people are going to need you to be up when everybody else is down. We're going to need you to be positive when everybody else is down. And it's hard to do that if you're not focused on your mindfulness. It's also hard to do it when you're not taking care of yourself, your physical health, that you should be getting that 19 pounds off of your body if you've gained weight during COVID. You got to eat better. You got to find a way to exercise more and get out if you can, walk and get some fresh air, drink more water. There's so many things that you got to do to take care of yourself. And that's the only way we're going to get through this crisis with you as a leader, is if you're here with us long term. So you got to take care of yourself. And the last thing is, I fundamentally believe that inspiration is what all of us need from our leaders right now. We don't need negative energy. We don't need hate. We don't need fighting and back and forth. But what we need to do is to be inspired and empowered to overcome this crisis. And so you need to be the bright light in the dark room. When everybody is down in the dumps about the crisis, the economy, racism in America, you got to turn a brighter light on and say, hey, we can get through this together. And I'm going to help lead us through it. And this is what I'm going to do. This is what we need from you. I fundamentally believe that the only way we overcome all of this adversity is if we pull together as Americans, as South Carolinians, as Colombians, as Charlestonians, as Greenvillians, and people who are from all across this state, Kingstree to Wagner, South Carolina. Doesn't matter where you're from, it is time for you to step up and lead. And we need you to help us to get through this crisis. So in summary, I want you to be like steel. I want you to be steady. I want you to be strong. And I want you to be unbreakable. I want you to be unbreakable. That means you're leading in these tough times. You're leaning into them. You're minimizing the fear of the unknown. You're standing up and speaking up the way you need to for your team and your clients, your communities. And you're focused on people and not the profits. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to open it up for Q&A. And I would love to take a dialogue with folks for the next 10 minutes or so. You're on mute, Nick, I believe.
Oh, here we go. How's that?
There you go.
All right. Sorry. Thank you. That was awesome, Anton. I tell you, let me share just a couple of quick takeaways before we take some questions. You know, just a few weeks ago, we had the anniversary of the Emmanuel Church shooting.
Yes.
And that very weekend, our association was hosting a leadership planning session at the Francis Marion Hotel, just a few blocks away that night. And our leadership included our now past president, Fritzy Barber, who passed away from cancer just over a week ago, lost her battle with ovarian cancer. And the very last text she sent me was on the anniversary of the church shooting and remembering the crisis of that event, of that weekend. We had flood events later that year. She talked about the crisis and how we responded and handled it. And I responded to her. The last text I ever sent her, the last thing I ever said to her was, there will always be crisis, as you mentioned, right? The only thing we can control is how we respond to it. And that to me just jumped out in your remarks. And leadership is about, owning the moment. You don't always know what to do, right? But you surround yourself with friends and leaders and colleagues and mentors who can show you the way. And my other takeaway is this taking good away from this COVID crisis, right? What are the things that we've learned as an association, as realtors, that we can implement and make a positive change going forward? I know as an association, I don't think there is a going back to the old ways of things. In the last 3 months, we've engaged thousands of realtors in formats like this, on Facebook and other ways that have cost us zero, but engaged members in ways that we've never done before.
Yes.
So why would we go back to the old ways of doing things? And the last thing, my third takeaway, the key point that you mentioned, as realtors, we hold our membership, we hold each other accountable to our code of ethics. And a large part of that is we cannot turn a blind eye. There's that old George Dylan song, or Bob Dylan, where he says, how many times can a man turn his head and pretend that he just doesn't see?
Correct.
And our code of ethics is only as good as the willingness of our members to not only abide by it, but also to report others, to file complaints when necessary. Reach out and be a mentor first, but if that doesn't work, then file a complaint. Those are just some of the notes I made, Anti. It's pretty amazing. Great. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I actually see a question here from an anonymous attendee, and I'm going to read the question for everyone who can't see it. If you work with a wonderful team of individuals and the leader is unwilling to bring the tough subject into business, what are some strategies to encourage a change of heart? So this is a great question. I will tell you, I've been talking to a lot of CEOs over the last 4 weeks who really want to bring up this tough subject of race into the workplace because they can see how the silence is actually impacting the organization. The fact that the whole world is watching and bringing it up, but they are not. And it's making people feel some kind of way about that leader because, they're not opening up the conversation. So my first strategy is always to tell you that nothing bad can come of this conversation. And the reason why I say that is because it is on everybody's mind, whether you want it to be or not wanting it to be. The key is how do you begin the conversation? And so here's what I would say. So if you want to begin a conversation around race, I'm going to give it to you from 2 vantage points. And I'm going to talk to you from a vantage point of a person of color and how they would bring that conversation up. And if you're someone white who want to bring up that conversation, this is how you would do it. So first and foremost, I would never bring up this conversation talking about facts and figures and data points because I had a business mentor tell me one time, Anton, facts tell, but stories sell. And what do I mean stories sell? He meant that stories are powerful examples of what's real. And so the same way that I started this webinar telling you about my story and my encounter with law enforcement, you can't argue with me about my personal experience. You can say, Anton, that didn't happen, but I know what I felt. I know what I feel in the middle of that circumstance and how I experienced it. So I always tell people to start from a place of your personal, of how you might feel about this issue. And so if you're a person of color, that's how I would start, is only talk about what you've experienced. Share your experience with someone that you work with. And a lot of us have never shared our experiences in this way. If you're not a person of color and you're a person who's white and you're trying to figure out how do we approach this subject at work, well, you need to broach it from a standpoint of inquisition and concern and of questioning, which is, I don't understand X, or my context would be as you think about your business or maybe the team that you work with, is ask the question, do you think we may have ever been discriminatory in any of our practices? Everybody's going to say, no, we haven't been. But the question is, do you think I might have some bias against someone, or I might be racially biased? I don't think I am, but I really don't know after I've learned from several people over the last several weeks. Another thing that I can give you, and this is a tool that people will find very helpful, I want you to Google the terms, and then you can write down these 3 terms: implicit association test, Harvard. So when I was at Harvard in 2014, I met Dr. Mahjarin Banaji. She has the world's largest research study on unconscious bias, or what they call implicit bias. And so there's a test called implicit association test done out of Harvard University. You can go take these free tests to see if you might have some biases. We have gender bias, you may have race bias, you may have all kinds of biases that you just don't even know you have, because our biases are in our subconscious mind that we don't see them happening. They're kind of like, that window on your computer that you've left open for years and years and years and never close it. And you forgot to swipe up on your iPhone or whatever, and you didn't take it away, but it's running in the background. Bias can actually have an impact on all of your decision-making. So bringing up a tough subject is first educating yourself first on how bias might be having an impact. So I'm going to give you the terms again. It is just start with Harvard, H-A-V-A-R-D, Harvard Implicit Association Test. And it's called the IAT test from Harvard. You just click on a button for disclosure, and they'll show you 14 different tests that you can take any one of them. You want to see if you might have a bias. And I think somebody will, it's already on the National Association of Realtors website. Someone just put into the chat that's available for you all. So yes, I would take a Harvard Implicit Association test. That'll give you some understanding around what your biases may be. And it's okay to bring up your biases at work and say, hey, I took this great test and I learned that I might have some gender bias, even though I'm a woman. And I also have some race bias. It's always something that you can learn, and encourage people in the office to take the test as well. And if that leader is still reluctant to bring up the conversation, as I said in my webinar, you can't wait for someone else to lead. This is your opportunity to step up and lead. And that's what we need you to do. Is you don't have to be a leader by title or position. You can be a leader by influence. And I think every realtor in South Carolina is a leader by influence.
I didn't want to interrupt you, Anton. NAR, our National Association, launched a new fair housing initiative back in January called ACT. And it stands for Accountability, Culture Change, and Training. Wow. And they just released this implicit bias training video just maybe a couple of weeks ago.
Wow.
So Julie, thanks for posting that link. She beat me to it. I was typing it in as she was.
That's fantastic.
Let's see. We've got a so we had a question about racial bias. So that I think that answered that. And Anton, when you shared that personal story about being pulled over by the police and in that manner, it's in my experience, I've been pulled over maybe theoretically a few times for speeding over the years, and I've never been scared of the policeman, right? I didn't like being pulled over, right. But I gave him my license and registration and all that, and And that's what I find is when you talk about sharing your story, making it personal, it's very, very hard for people to relate to these situations if you can't walk in their shoes.
Yeah.
How do we do a better job of communicating that on a personal level without, because everything we see on social media and we get bombarded in the press is, Republican, Democrat, blah, 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 everybody attacking each other. How do we make this about us as people?
Yeah. So, I have a business mentor who told me something. He told me, whenever you're on a business trip and whenever you're doing business, never dine alone. And that's his philosophy of always networking, is to find a way to connect with someone that you can take to coffee, that you can have lunch with, you can have dinner with, to really build relationships. And I would say relationships are everything in this process. So how I would advise anyone who's really trying to gain an understanding and relate, this is only going to happen when you build relationships with people who are different than you. Again, everybody who knows me and has known me for a very long time, they know that story because I talk about it all the time. It's just in mixed company that I've never done that. When I say mixed company, is racially mixed company. I've never had that conversation until recently, because I found that people cannot relate to what they see on TV. Like, they see what happened to George Floyd and they assume, well, he must have been doing something wrong in order for him to get handcuffed in the first place, or he got to be a criminal. And cops don't do that to innocent, good people who follow the law. Well, I will tell you, I follow the law. I'm 4 generations of military brat. 4 generations of my men served the country. We're all patriots. We do everything. I play football for the Gamecocks, because I'm perfect because I play football for the Gamecocks. So I didn't do anything wrong there. I'm just making light of the context, is that I live a good life and I do the right thing. And it's not until I share that story that people actually understand that this can happen to anybody. And I literally live my life in a place of discomfort because of law enforcement. So, for instance, I don't keep my registration in the glove box. I don't keep my insurance card in the glove box, because if I get pulled over, there is no reason in the world I'm going to reach down for anything. But where I keep it is in the visor above my head. So if a cop comes and pulls me over and he asks me for my license registration, he can see my hands go up to my visor, where you can obviously see there wouldn't be a gun hanging over my visor. But the belief is that if I reach down, that they think I got a gun and then I'm reaching for a gun. Okay. I also, keep both hands on the steering wheel, roll all of my windows down when I get pulled over. I don't care if it's 1,000 degrees outside. If a cop pulls me over, I'm rolling all 4 of my windows down, because I want him to see that there's nobody in the back seat, that there's nobody riding with me, and that he can see me walking up to the car. These are things that people don't think about. I'll give you another example, and then, I'm going to kind of close when I want to tell everybody what you should do. Is I live in a nice suburban middle-class neighborhood in Charleston. It's very, very nice. But I know, because of our neighborhood Facebook group, that it would be dangerous for me to go for a walk around my neighborhood at night or early in the morning before the sun comes up. Because as much as my neighbors might know me and see me during the day when I walk at 12 noon or I walk at 10 a.m. or 7 a.m., when it's dusk outside, I hear them talk about suspicious characters, and that there was somebody suspicious in the neighborhood, and the person had on a baseball cap. I don't wear baseball caps generally when I walk, because I want people to see me, because I don't want to be mistaken as somebody who's not supposed to belong in the neighborhood and end up shot like Ahmaud Arbery ended up shot in Brunswick, Georgia. These are real and present fears that I have. Now, many of you may never heard any of those type stories, but I promise you, if you take the effort to build a relationship with someone in your industry, so find a realtor that you know that's in your office, or maybe it's not in your office if you don't have any in your office, but connect with them and build a relationship. Have coffee, do a Zoom call, and have a one-on-one conversation about race, and gain some insight to their experience and their perspective. It could be very different than mine, or it could be very similar. But the more times you do that, the more people you intentionally build a relationship with, the more you can understand there's another side to this coin that we call life that is not the same as your side of the coin. And there's a level of uncomfortableness that we have with problems, and there are ways that we got to now fix it.
Wow. I have to admit, Anton, that hurts to hear that, you know, a friend is unable or fearful of walking in their own neighborhood. I mean, that's stunning to me. And you know, my parents came to the United States. They were Greek immigrants,
Mm-hmm.
as you've heard me say before, and they you know they it's I think of my job at the Realtor as kind of a legacy to their chasing of the American dream, right?
Correct.
But as kids, as adults in the neighborhood I live in now, I mean, that's never even crossed my mind not to walk to be worried about walking on the street at night.
Yeah, I mean, it's a reality, and I wish it was different. And one day, I hope that my grandchildren can grow up in a world where it doesn't matter. And we've made a lot of progress. A lot of people will tell you that, you know, things are really bad now and they're worse than they've ever been. We've made a lot of progress, and I've been the, you know, blessed beneficiary of a lot of progress in America and the world, and so have my family and lots of my friends. But I also know lots of people who I grew with who hadn't seen that progress, and how they encounter communities and how they try to live their lives.
Well, I believe together we can, and I know our association is committed to making a positive change. Valerie asks if SCR or NAR has provided a history of systemic racism in housing. And NAR, Valerie, did post, they created this presentation at a national meeting last year that shows the good, the bad, and the ugly of the Realtor organization, and how they contributed to racism at one point, and how they've recognized the mistakes of the past and the attempts to fix it going forward. So I'll put a link out there to show that. It's a very moving video.
You know, Nick, I got one other video that I want to share with people, because I'm really big on, and I know not everybody's a reader, so I could give you like 50 thick books that you can read, but a lot of people are quick with video, and because YouTube and all these things make things so much easier to digest information, I found a phenomenal video that was posted online about structural racism that really breaks it down in about 17 minutes and 50 seconds, that people can really get a great understanding around the complexity of this challenge. And so I'm going to share it with you. And for those of you who have children, young children, you might have heard of a YouTube show called Veggie Tales. And it's about vegetables who talk to each other about all kinds of things. And it's been online for many, many years. Well, the creator of Veggie Tales did this post. And the keywords that you can search on YouTube is holy post, HOLY post, and structural racism, or let's talk about race. It is profound what he documents from the end of the Civil War to current day about structural racism in America. And if somebody can find a link for it and post it in the chat and people can get access to it, please do so. I just think it's very well done. It actually talks a lot about housing discrimination and how even outside of realtors' history attached to it, how you couldn't get a home loan underwritten by the federal government unless you explicitly refused to sell it to African Americans. That was actually codified in federal law. And it talked about the GI Bill, how when veterans came back from the war, that there were a lot of programs for veterans that white veterans were able to take advantage of to buy a home and build wealth, but Black veterans were not able to do so. And so this 17-minute documentary called Holy Post, and it's been linked to by Michael there, will just kind of give you in 17 minutes and 52 seconds a lot of history that most Americans have never had any kind of analysis about. And I even learned some things in that video about wealth and the importance of, we all know the importance of home ownership in terms of building wealth, but how this has been passed down for generations. But for people that look like me, we either couldn't own a homes or when we did buy a home in a community, we were run out of town or run out of the community because of the color of our skin. So these are things that I think are very helpful for people to get some understanding about. Now, I want to read this last comment, and I'm going to turn it back to you, from John. He says, it's not a question, just a comment. Great discussion about such important subjects. I guess I do have one question. How did a Gamecock get so insightful? Go Tigers. Well, let me tell you how, John. It's because this Gamecock never lost in Death Valley in his career at South Carolina. So there's not a lot of Gamecocks who can say that, but this Gamecock can say that I never lost in Death Valley. So you learn a lot by winning.
Oh man, I really hope that David Lockwood and David Kent and all of my other friends are listening. That you just made my day, Anton. Thank you. There's one final question, if I may, Anton. We've had racial division before. We've had incidents of brutality, of murder, of redlining. I mean, this Newsday investigation out of New York last November, should have been on the front page of every paper of the country, showing how agents were steering clients to areas based on the color of their skin or ethnicity. And the worst part about all that was these individuals, the families, the homeowners, didn't even know they were being discriminated against until they saw the videos afterwards. And then you see the tears flowing, not realizing what had been done to them. What makes this summer different? What's going to make this stick? What's going to make this change? Why is this different?
Yeah, I would say, I believe that it's different now because you have an increased level of consciousness in places that it hadn't been before. So for instance, you know, in times past, you would see people who point out racism and injustice, the whole crowd would look like me and none would look like you. But now we're seeing this intergenerational, interracial mix of people who are saying, you know what, that is messed up. It is wrong. You know, I didn't think it would be George Floyd that would open people's eyes to police brutality and injustice against people of color. For me, it would have been Rodney King in 1991. I thought the first time we saw it on video that would just wake everybody up to what's real. And even 3 years before that, when NWA told everybody about their experience with the police, you thought people would have awakened, but they didn't. But I think now we have a intergenerational conversation happening, an interracial conversation that's happening, a conversation that's happening in professional places. The fact that you're actually doing a webinar about this is powerful because guess what? Not everybody is doing it. There are a lot of associations who are not having this kind of conversation. And so the fact that you're willing to be a leader, to bring voice, to speak up and stand up and create the space for the conversation, I think is incredibly powerful. And that's what I feel like is different this time, is that you're having conversations in places where I can't go. You're having discussions in places with people who I would never have that conversation to speak with. And it's what I call the breaking of the social conscious construct. Because I believe this, Nick, and I'll just kind of close with this. I believe 50% of the people are what I call living in oblivion. They're like blind to everything. These are the people who just like move through life and everything is good. There's never a problem. There's never a care in the world. There's never anything to be concerned about. They're just kind of blind to injustice, unfairness, racism. They're blind to what's wrong in any situation. 50% are living in oblivion. And then you have 35% of people who see what's wrong, but they don't do anything about it. And they don't do anything about it because either one, they don't know what to do. Secondly, they feel powerless. They say, you know what, I don't know what to do, or I do know what to do, but I just feel like, what can little old me do about this big complex problem? I can't do anything about that. And then the third question that is, or the third statement they make is, that ain't my responsibility to do anything about the problem. It's somebody else's responsibility. It's somebody else's job to address these issues. So that's about 35%. So between that group, you got 50% who are living in oblivion, 35% who know better than don't do any better. That's 85%. And I started by telling you about the 10%. The 10% who intentionally continue to perpetuate the injustice and what's wrong because they believe that they're going to benefit socially, morally, politically, economically, or intellectually from it. They perpetuate it. But think about it in this regard. They're only 10%. 85% either aren't aware or aware or feel powerless. But then you have what I call the 5%. These are the most admired leaders. Leaders who recognize that there's injustice and unfairness, and they spend 100% of their time trying to educate the 50% and empower the 35%. And so what we have now are people who are in that 5% educating the 50%. And so now that number is starting to shrink. And that number, the 35% who know better but don't do anything, are now starting to do things. And that's what I feel like is different. But I want to put in a word of caution that we can go backwards. Here's why we go backwards. We go backwards if we stop having the conversation and we stop taking action. It's kind of like going to work out in the gym. The very first time you go into the gym to work out, that weight you lift is going to be very heavy. It's going to be hard to lift it up. And when you finish the workout, you're going to be super sore. And it's going to make you not want to go back to the gym again because of how sore you feel. But if you keep going back to the gym every day, not only will the weight get lighter and you get stronger, you will start to look better and feel better about everything that's going on around you. So that's what this conversation about race is about going to the gym every day to lift up that difficult weight until I can get stronger, talking about it, identifying racism and structural things that are racist and problems that we have in the industry and problems that we have individually. The more you do it, the stronger you get, the better we all get. But the moment you stop going back to the gym and take a week off, 2 weeks off, 6 months off, you're going to go back to that pain point like it was the very first time you went into the gym. And so now we've been out of the gym for 50 years in America, but now we're back in the gym, and it's time for us to stay in the gym so we all get better and we all can make a difference for every person that we serve.
That's an amazing way to end this webinar, but it is not the end of this conversation, isn't it?
Not at all.
It's just the beginning. And to all the realtors listening today, please join me in thanking Anton for sharing his insights with us today. And let's use this as a as a starting point. I know that in a couple of weeks, our board of directors will be meeting. We'll be discussing what action steps we'll be taking as an association. I don't believe in empty words, Anton. I believe in action and moving forward and leading in times of crisis. And you've given us a great platform to start from. Thank you so much for being with us today. And thank you to all the realtors that took time to join us today. Thank you for all your questions. And I hope that everyone stays safe and stays realtor strong. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.